Let's get started. Story number 1.
It started with small things, little details I thought I was just forgetting, like finding the light on in the kitchen in the morning when I was sure I'd turned it off the night before, or noticing that my phone was moved an inch or two from where I always set it on my nightstand. Minor stuff. Stuff you don't think twice about, because what's the point? You just tell yourself you're tired or distracted or getting careless. I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the top floor of a quiet building in Akron, Ohio. I'd been there for almost 3 years, and nothing strange had ever happened. I worked nights as a dispatcher for a local freight company, which meant I got off work around 5 a.m., went home, ate something light, and usually passed out by 6. I was a night owl by nature, so it worked for me. The quiet during the day was my kind of peace. One Thursday afternoon, I woke up from a nap drenched in sweat, heart pounding. I couldn't remember what I'd been dreaming about, just the feeling. Something behind me. Something wrong. The kind of feeling that lingers, like the ghost of fear. I chalked it up to a nightmare and didn't think more about it until I went to shower and noticed the shower curtain had been pulled fully closed. I never leave it like that. I always keep it half open to let it dry. Again, I told myself I must have been out of it that morning, but the next day I had another dream. This one I remembered. I was walking through my apartment, my exact apartment, but it was off. The light was dim, not quite daylight, not quite night. Everything had a slight green tinge to it, and there was this low hum in the air, like a refrigerator running but louder. I walked past the kitchen and saw someone standing in the hallway, not moving, not facing me, just standing halfway between me and the bathroom. I tried to speak, but couldn't. My voice didn't work. I reached out to touch them, and they turned their head just slightly, enough to see the side of their face, but not the full thing. It looked like me. Same hair, same frame, but the eye that was visible, it was wrong. Empty, like there was nothing behind it. Then I woke up, breathing like I'd been running. I didn't sleep much that weekend. On Sunday night, I went to work and found myself feeling off the whole shift. I kept thinking about the dream and how vividly I remembered the texture of the hallway carpet in it. It felt identical to mine. I even remember stepping over the little snag near the bathroom door that's been there since I moved in. That level of detail in a dream didn't sit right with me. I went home at 5:15 a.m. and locked the door behind me like usual. I was halfway through eating toast at the counter when I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a faint handprint on the inside of the living room window. The glass fogged up a little from the toaster heat, and in that condensation I saw it, clear as day. A handprint, too high up for me to have accidentally made. It was above eye level. I'm 6 feet tall. I stood there staring at it until the fog faded. I didn't sleep that day. I just laid in bed with the lights on and stared at the ceiling. That night, when I finally did fall asleep, the dream picked up exactly where it had left off. I was in the hallway again. But this time, I wasn't alone. The figure that looked like me was crouched by the bathroom door, head tilted at an impossible angle. It looked like it was listening to something on the other side. Then it slowly turned to face me. I saw my own face twisted into a smile that was too wide, too perfect. Its lips never moved, but I heard the words clear as day, like they were echoing from the walls themselves. "You're not supposed to be here yet." I ran, but the hallway stretched like rubber. The walls bled into shadows. I could hear footsteps behind me, matching my pace. The last thing I remember before waking up was reaching the front door and finding it locked from the outside. I woke up screaming. From that point on, I started noticing strange things every day. My toothbrush would be wet when I hadn't used it. The TV would be on a different input. One day, I came home to find the fridge door slightly ajar. Nothing was taken, nothing was spoiled, but it rattled me. I started placing little markers, tape on the door frames, bits of thread between the cabinets, just to make sure I wasn't going crazy. And the dreams kept coming. Always the same figure. Always my apartment. Always something wrong. One night, it wasn't in the hallway anymore. It was sitting at my kitchen table. I walked in, and there I was. Same clothes, same haircut, same posture. It looked at me and said, "You're late." Then it stood up and walked toward me, each step louder than it should have been, like it was stomping through my bones. I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The walls closed in. The lights flickered and went out. When I woke up, I was lying on my kitchen floor. I don't remember getting up. I don't remember walking to the kitchen, but I was on my back, looking up at the ceiling fan, and my head hurt like I'd fallen. My legs were shaking. I scrambled to my feet and checked the time, 3:33 p.m. That afternoon, I went to a walk-in clinic and told them I was having sleep issues. They gave me a mild sedative, enough to help me fall asleep, but not strong enough to knock me out. I was desperate. I thought maybe if I could rest deeply enough, the dreams would stop. I took one pill before bed. The dream was different this time. I was outside my building. It was snowing lightly, even though it was June. I could see my window from the sidewalk. The blinds were open, and I could see myself inside, pacing. The version of me in the window looked agitated, shaking its head, talking to itself. Then it stopped and stared straight at me, like it knew I was watching. It walked to the window and smiled. Then it lifted its hand and ran a finger down the glass. When I woke up, I didn't even check the window. I just left the apartment and drove aimlessly for 2 hours, not sure what I was running from. Eventually, I confided in a coworker, Josh. He was the only one I trusted not to laugh it off. To his credit, he listened, asked questions. He even offered to spend the night in my apartment to see for himself. He thought maybe I was sleepwalking or that someone had broken in. So we made a plan. He'd stay over after work, crash on the couch, and we'd both keep watch. That night, we both sat in the living room with the lights dimmed. Nothing happened for hours. Around 3 a.m., I nodded off for just a moment. I know it wasn't long because Josh was still sitting across from me when I opened my eyes. But he looked different. His face was pale, eyes wide. "You were talking in your sleep," he said. I sat up straighter. "What did I say?" He hesitated, then said, "You said, 'Let me in,' over and over, and your voice didn't sound right." That chilled me to my core. He didn't spend the night after that. I moved out a week later. I didn't tell my landlord the real reason. I said I needed to be closer to work, that I had family issues, anything that would sound normal. I just couldn't stay in that apartment any longer. I moved to a newer building, high floor, lots of windows and natural light. I even got a roommate, just for the comfort of not being alone anymore. For a while, everything was okay. Then, about a month after the move, I had a dream where I was in my new room. Everything matched reality. The color of the walls, the bookshelf, the way the moonlight came through the blinds. I was lying in bed, unable to move. The door creaked open, and I saw the same version of me walk in. He sat on the edge of the bed and leaned in close, whispering directly into my ear. "This isn't your life anymore." I tried to scream, but couldn't. I felt his breath on my face, cold, sharp. Then he stood up, walked to the mirror, and stepped through it. When I woke up, the mirror in my bedroom had a crack running straight down the middle. I hadn't touched it. That's when I knew I hadn't escaped anything. Something followed me, and I don't know if it came from my dreams or if I wandered into its world by accident. But it knows me now. It knows where I live, what I fear, how I think. Some nights I wake up and find the closet door open. Other nights I find sticky notes in my handwriting, things I didn't write. One said, "You're already inside." Another said, "They think you're him." I don't know how long I can live like this. I try not to sleep much anymore. I've gone 3 days without it once, but the dreams always find a way back in. What terrifies me most is that I can no longer tell whether I'm dreaming or awake. Sometimes the coffee mug in the kitchen is on the wrong side, or the song on the radio plays backward for a second, or my own reflection in the mirror blinks when I don't. If the dream version of me really is walking around out here, if he's taken something from me, I don't know what I can do, but I feel him getting closer every time I close my eyes. Story. The end.
Story number 2.
The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. I chalked it up to a nightmare. One of those dreams that leaves a strange taste in your mouth for the rest of the day. I was staying at my cousin Eric's house in Vermont for a few weeks after losing my job. He had a spare room in his old farmhouse, and I needed space to breathe and sort out my life. It seemed like the perfect escape. Remote, quiet, surrounded by thick woods and fog-covered hills. I hadn't dreamed in months, not since my breakup. My sleep had been black and empty, which I welcomed. So when the first dream came, it hit hard. In it, I was in Eric's hallway, not a weird, surreal dream version. His actual hallway, narrow and dim, with creaky floorboards and old wallpaper that peeled at the seams. I was standing there barefoot, the way you do when you're half asleep and stumbling to the bathroom. But in the dream, I wasn't heading to the bathroom. I was facing the attic door at the far end of the hall. It was open, just a crack. That was the only strange part. In real life, the attic door always stayed shut. Eric told me it was full of insulation, old furniture, and mouse droppings. Nothing worth seeing. In the dream, though, that narrow opening drew my eyes like a magnet. I couldn't look away, and I could hear something faint up there. Not movement exactly, more like breathing. Soft, rhythmic, and disturbingly human. I tried to move, to back away, but my legs felt heavy and locked. I just stood there, staring at the black sliver of space beyond the door. When I woke up, I was in a cold sweat. My heart was hammering, and my mouth was dry. It was 3:47 a.m. I sat in bed for a while, trying to calm down, trying to convince myself it was just a dream. I eventually fell back asleep, and by morning, I'd mostly pushed it from my mind, until I saw the attic door. It was open, just a crack, maybe an inch. The same as in the dream. I stood there staring at it, trying to remember if I'd seen it like that the night before. Maybe Eric had gone up there and forgotten to close it fully. That seemed logical. That made sense. So I pushed it closed. It creaked slightly, but it latched shut. I even tested it to be sure. That night I dreamt again. Same hallway, same door, but this time I was closer to it, maybe only a few steps away. I could see more detail, like the way the edge of the doorframe had claw marks etched into the wood. Long, narrow gouges that looked deliberate, like something or someone had tried to pry it open with their hands. And again, the breathing. It was louder now. Still rhythmic, still steady, but more pronounced. I could almost sense heat coming from the gap in the door, like someone warm was just behind it. I woke up again in a sweat, my sheets twisted around my legs. I didn't go check the attic that time. I didn't want to know. That day, I asked Eric casually if he'd been up there. He looked at me strangely and said no. Said he hadn't touched that door in over a year. Said he barely thought about it anymore. I said nothing. I didn't want to sound like I was losing it. That night, I left the hall light on, but the dream came anyway. Now I was standing right in front of the door. I could feel the wood of it just inches from my face, could smell the dust and the old timber, feel the coolness radiating from within. The breathing wasn't just a sound anymore, it was a presence. I could feel it vibrating in my chest like bass through a speaker. Something was waiting on the other side. I leaned closer, and then something whispered my name. Clear. Soft, right in my ear. That broke the dream. I woke up gasping, heart racing, lungs burning. The attic door was wide open. I couldn't move for nearly a minute. I just sat upright in bed, frozen, staring out at the hallway from my room. The door was gaping open, blackness stretching beyond it like a mouth. I told Eric. He laughed nervously at first, but then he saw I wasn't joking. I told him everything. The dreams, the breathing, the claw marks, the door opening by itself. He got pale, sat real still, and didn't say much for a while. Then he told me something he never had before. About 6 years ago, the man who owned the house before him, an older guy named Thomas, had died. Not in the house, but close. He'd hung himself in the woods about a quarter-mile back. They found his body 2 weeks after he went missing. There was no note. But the weird part was, before he died, Thomas had been writing letters to someone. Or something. Eric had found them in a drawer in the attic after he bought the place. He never read them all, just a few. He said the handwriting got more and more erratic, the grammar broken. The parts he read talked about dreams, a presence behind the attic door, a voice that whispered when he was asleep. He never mentioned this to anyone, because he thought it was just rambling from a man who'd lost his mind. I asked where the letters were now. He said he burned them. I barely slept that night. I left the hall light on, the lamp by my bed, even my phone flashlight pointed at the doorway. None of it helped. I dreamt again, but this time I wasn't in the hallway. I was in the attic. It was cramped, full of dust and shadows, boxes stacked in corners, old chairs draped with yellowing sheets. The breathing was deafening, and I could feel something behind me, just out of sight, just over my shoulder. I didn't want to turn around. I couldn't. My feet were rooted to the floor. The whisper came again, my name drawn out like a threat. and then a hand, long, thin, gray-skinned, touched my neck. I screamed myself awake. The attic door was closed this time, but on the floor just outside my room I saw something, a long, gray smudge, almost like ash, almost like a footprint. I tried to leave the next day. I told Eric I needed to get back to the city, that I'd sorted things out, that I had a lead on a job. He didn't argue, but he asked me to promise one thing before I left. He asked me to sleep there one more night. He said he wanted to see something, test a theory. I didn't want to. Every cell in my body was telling me to run, but he was my cousin. He'd opened his home to me. I owed him that much. So I stayed. We set up a baby monitor in the hallway, one of those high-end ones with video and audio. He had it from when his sister visited with her newborn. We placed the camera facing the attic door and left the receiver in the kitchen. We also locked the attic from the outside with a new padlock. He even wedged a chair under the knob. I saw him do it with my own eyes. I went to bed early, left all the lights on again. I woke up in the attic. In the dream, but this time I wasn't alone. There was a figure crouched in the corner, emaciated, twitching, its skin mottled with black veins. It had no eyes, just deep hollows where they should be. Its mouth was impossibly wide, full of too many teeth, and it was smiling. It stood slowly, bones cracking. It didn't walk. It glided. It came closer, closer, until its face was inches from mine. It didn't whisper my name this time. It said, "Thank you for opening the door." And then it screamed. I shot awake, covered in sweat, lungs heaving, ears ringing. I ran into the hallway. The attic door was open. The padlock was still there, hanging from the latch, untouched. But the chair was on its side, the door frame splintered. Something had pushed from the inside. Eric was already in the kitchen, staring at the monitor. The footage was frozen. The last frame showed the attic door swinging open, and a figure, a shape, just barely visible, peeking through. We left that day. Eric sold the house a few months later, told the realtor to handle it, and didn't step foot back in it once. I moved back to the city, tried to forget. I saw a therapist, took sleep meds. They worked for a while, but 2 weeks ago I had another dream. I was in a hallway, not Eric's, mine, my apartment. At the end of it was a door. It was cracked open, and I could hear breathing. Story the end.
Story number 3.
It started after I moved into my aunt's old house, the one she left me when she passed. She had lived alone in a quiet part of town, one of those neighborhoods where all the homes look identical and you rarely see anyone outside except maybe a dog walker or two in the morning. The house had been sitting empty for about a year before I moved in. My job was remote, so I figured it would be a good change of pace, a quiet place to work and save some money. I didn't know much about her personally. We weren't very close. She was always a bit odd, especially in her last years. But she left me the house, no strings attached, and I wasn't in a position to be picky. The first couple weeks were normal, boring even. I unpacked slowly, worked during the day, took walks in the evening. The house was dated, green carpets, floral wallpaper, wood paneling, but structurally fine. My aunt had kept it clean, and the utilities were still hooked up. Nothing stood out, not at first. It began with the dreams. The first one didn't even seem like a dream. I was lying in bed in the new bedroom, and in the dream, I was also in bed. Same posture, same position. But the room was darker than it should have been. Not just night dark. It felt hollow, like light had been sucked from the air. I couldn't move. Something stood at the doorway, just out of focus. A tall figure, unmoving, watching. I felt the overwhelming sense that if I looked directly at it, I'd see something I wasn't supposed to. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart racing. It was 4:12 a.m. I chalked it up to stress, new environment, new routine. I told myself it was probably my brain processing the change, but it happened again the next night. Same dream, same room. This time, the figure was closer, at the foot of my bed, still hazy, still motionless. I couldn't move or speak. I felt its presence, not malevolent exactly, but oppressive, like being under deep water. When I woke up, it was the same time, 4:12 a.m. The third night, I didn't sleep. I tried, but every time I drifted off, I'd jerk awake with this overwhelming sense of being watched, like something was just out of reach, waiting. I turned on every light in the house and left the bedroom door open. I even checked the locks twice. Everything was secure. By the fifth night, the dream changed. It started the same. I was in bed in the dream exactly how I'd fallen asleep, but this time I could hear breathing, not mine. Deep, rhythmic, slow. Coming from inside the room, I tried to move but was paralyzed, unable to even turn my head. The breathing grew louder. Then I heard a whisper. It said my name, not screamed, not shouted, just a soft, deliberate whisper. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? Hey, I moved into my dead aunt's house and now I'm being haunted in my dreams by some shadow thing that knows my name. Yeah, right. I tried looking up sleep paralysis. I figured that's what it was. The internet was full of stories like mine. Most people said it was harmless, just your brain waking up before your body. Some said it was connected to stress or irregular sleep cycles. But none of that explained why it always happened at the exact same time, or why it felt so much more real than anything I'd experienced. Then things started happening while I was awake. I began hearing faint knocks at night. Always faint, always from the same spot, somewhere near the hallway closet. Sometimes it was one knock, sometimes three. I checked every time. There was never anyone there. One night I heard the knock while I was brushing my teeth. I spat out the foam and listened. Knock, knock, knock. I walked into the hallway, and the air felt colder. Not dramatically, but just enough to notice. I opened the closet. Nothing inside but some of my aunt's old coats and a few dusty boxes. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. Then I started seeing things. It began subtly. I'd leave my keys on the kitchen counter, only to find them on the hallway table. My coffee mug, always rinsed and placed upside down beside the sink, would be found full of water in the microwave. One night I came out of the bathroom and swore I saw a shape move across the end of the hallway. I turned the lights on and checked every room. Nothing. Every window was locked, every door still shut. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was letting the dreams mess with my head. But then the dreams began to change in ways that didn't make sense. I started seeing details in them that hadn't been in my room before, but later were. One night, I dreamed of a deep scratch on the inside of my bedroom door, like someone had dragged something sharp across it. The next morning, it was there. I stood in my pajamas, hand trembling, tracing the rough gouge in the wood. It hadn't been there the day before. I would have noticed. I should have noticed. Another night, I dreamed of opening one of the boxes in the hallway closet. Inside were dozens of old Polaroid photos, all of different rooms in the house, all dark and blurry. Some were just photos of empty corners. Some had small shapes in the background, barely visible. In the dream, I stared at one photo of my bedroom. In the window, I could make out a faint reflection of a face behind the curtain, not mine. The next day, curiosity, or something darker, got the better of me. I opened the same box from the dream. The Polaroids were there, every single one. I flipped through them, my hands cold. The photo of my bedroom was exactly as I'd seen it in the dream. The same shape in the window, the same impossible angle. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat on the couch with every light on, watching old reruns, trying to stay awake. I dozed off sometime after 3 a.m. and woke up on the floor, my head against the cold tile. The television was off. The lights were off. I never turned them off. My phone was missing. I found it later in the fridge. I don't remember putting it there. The next morning, I found a new Polaroid. It wasn't in the box. It was sitting on the kitchen counter beside my empty coffee mug. The photo was of me asleep on the couch from the night before. The angle was low, like someone had crouched in the dark just a few feet away and snapped it. I moved out that same day. Threw everything I could fit into my car and drove to a motel 2 towns over. I didn't go back for the rest. I couldn't. But the dreams followed me. The first night in the motel, I dreamed of a room that wasn't mine. A long corridor, empty, with only a single flickering bulb above. At the end was a mirror. In it, I saw myself, but not quite. My reflection didn't match my movements. When I stepped forward, it stepped back. When I raised my right hand, it raised its left. Then it smiled. I didn't. I woke up and found the motel mirror cracked, a clean, jagged line down the center. The manager swore it had been fine before. I went to stay with a friend after that, someone I hadn't seen in years, but who didn't ask too many questions. The first week was quiet. I started to believe it was over. Then the whispers returned. One night, while brushing my teeth, I heard it faintly again. My name. A breathy, slow whisper from behind me. I turned around. Nothing there. My friend was asleep on the couch. The dreams became worse. Now I saw other people in them. People I didn't know. A woman with no eyes standing in a bathtub full of black water. A man whose mouth had been sewn shut who banged his head repeatedly against a wall. Sometimes I saw my aunt staring at me from her old bedroom, mouthing something I couldn't understand. One night, I finally understood what she was saying. Don't look in the attic. I didn't know there was an attic. I had never checked, never even noticed an entrance. I went back. I don't know what made me do it. Some part of me needed to see, to understand. I drove to the house during daylight, telling myself I'd be in and out within the hour. The place was just as I'd left it. Dusty, stale. I found the attic hatch in the hallway ceiling, hidden above a coat rack. I had to pull over a chair to reach it. The attic was small, dark, filled with old furniture and rotting boxes. I almost turned back, almost, but then I saw the chair. It was an old wooden rocker positioned in the far corner facing the wall. A single light bulb hung above it, swaying slightly. There was dust everywhere, except the chair. The wood was clean, polished, like someone had just been sitting there. Next to it on the floor was another Polaroid. I picked it up. It was me, standing in the attic holding the photograph. I dropped it and ran. I've been living out of my car ever since. I sleep in public rest stops, diners, anywhere with lights and people. I don't sleep more than an hour or two at a time, but it's not enough. The dreams find me still. Every time I close my eyes, I see myself. Not me, exactly, the other version, the one that watches, the one that smiles when I don't. It's waiting. I can feel it getting closer. I don't know how much longer I have before the dreams stop being dreams. Story, the end.
Story number 4.
I've never believed in fate or premonitions or any of that new age spiritualism. Dreams were just dreams, random firings of the brain, weird mental reruns of the day's stress, and half-forgotten memories. That was how I always saw it. I'm a practical person, the kind who sets 3 alarms to make sure I wake up, who keeps their receipts in labeled envelopes. I live in a studio apartment in Pittsburgh and work as an intake coordinator at a legal aid office. My life is not thrilling, but it is consistent. At least it was. It started quietly, subtle enough that I barely noticed. The first dream came on a rainy Thursday night last March. I was at my desk working on intakes when the rain started. I remember it because the window in our office leaks and I had to move the files to keep them dry. That night, after getting home late and skipping dinner, I collapsed into bed, still in my work clothes. In the dream, I was standing on a street corner downtown. It was night and the street was wet from rain. A bus went by, splashing water against the curb. Across the street, under a dim yellow light, stood a man in a black hoodie, pacing. He stopped, pulled something from his pocket, a knife, and walked toward a nearby alley. I followed, even though I knew I shouldn't. When I turned into the alley, the man was standing over someone curled on the ground, blood spreading around them in a wide, dark pool. He looked at me, his face was shadowed, but his eyes were sharp and clear. And then I woke up. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Just a dream. Vague, eerie, but meaningless. But the next morning, while scrolling through local news on my phone before work, I saw the headline, "Man found stabbed in downtown alley." The location was only 2 blocks from where I'd been in the dream. The article had few details, just that the body was discovered early that morning. No suspects yet. It unsettled me, but I brushed it off. Coincidence. A lot of crime happens in the city. It's not hard to dream something that ends up aligning with reality if it's vague enough. But then it happened again. A week later, I dreamed of a house on fire. The sky was an eerie orange, flames licking through the windows of a small 2-story home with blue shutters. I could hear screams from inside, childlike, panicked. I stood frozen in the front yard, unable to move, while the heat blistered my skin. A neighbor ran out, yelling for someone named Claire, and then everything went silent. When I woke up, I could still smell the smoke. I couldn't help myself. I searched online. 3 pages into the local news section, there it was. Early morning house fire kills 2, injures child. The photo showed the house. Same blue shutters. The name of the surviving child? Claire. I stared at the screen for a long time. I couldn't explain it. My logical brain wanted to believe it was all chance, just the result of stress and bad sleep. But the images in my head were too specific. The shutters, the name, the screaming. I started to question myself. Was I remembering the dream after I saw the news? Had I somehow created false memories? I bought a notebook that weekend and started recording everything. Every dream, no matter how mundane or strange. I'd write them down immediately after waking, timestamp them, try to separate real dreams from things I might have overheard or seen. That's when things got worse. The dreams became clearer, sharper, like I was watching them in high definition. I'd see accidents before they happened. An older man falling down an escalator at the airport, a woman getting hit by a truck while chasing her dog across the street. Each time I'd record it. And each time within a few days, I'd see it in the news or hear about it secondhand. Never exactly the same, but too close to ignore. Same descriptions, same places, same outcomes. I tried telling my friend Mark, a guy I'd known since undergrad. He listened patiently while I read through my notes and explained what was happening. He said it was probably stress, maybe some sort of anxiety-induced hallucination or sleep disorder. You should talk to someone, he said gently. A professional. I agreed, even though I knew it wouldn't help. This wasn't in my head. One night, I dreamed of Mark. In the dream, he was walking down the parking ramp at his apartment complex. He looked tired, like he'd just gotten home from work. As he reached the second level, someone stepped out from behind a pillar. A man with a red baseball cap. They argued, and then the man pushed him, hard. Mark's head hit the concrete edge of the step. There was a crack. And then blood. So much blood. I jolted awake at 3:12 a.m. My heart was racing. My hands were shaking as I wrote down every detail, the red cap, the black hoodie, the chipped paint on the parking garage rail. I called him at 7 a.m. Don't go out tonight, I said without preamble. Please, just promise me. He sounded groggy. What? I mean it, Mark. Stay home, don't go anywhere alone. There was a pause. Is this about one of your dreams again? Yes. Another pause, longer this time. Okay, I'll stay in. That night, I barely slept. But the next day, I heard from him. You were right, he said. Sort of. Someone did try to mug a guy in our parking ramp. Cops came. I watched from my balcony. It was the first time something didn't happen exactly as I'd seen it. It felt like I'd changed something. Maybe somehow I'd intervened. So I tried to stop another one. This time it was a child. In the dream, she was alone in a park, climbing a rusted jungle gym. Her foot slipped. She fell awkwardly and landed on her neck. There was a terrible crunch. I could still hear it when I woke up. The park was familiar. I knew where it was, 2 blocks from my office. At lunch, I walked there, heart hammering. A little girl was playing alone on the monkey bars. I scanned the area. No parents, no other kids, just her. I approached, careful not to scare her. Hey, sweetie, I said softly. Where's your mom? She stared at me with wide eyes. I looked around and saw no one. I knew it would look wrong, a stranger talking to a child in a park, but I didn't care. Can I help you? A voice snapped. A woman jogged up, glaring. The girl ran to her. I tried to explain, fumbling, saying I thought she was hurt, that I was just making sure. The woman threatened to call the police. I left in a panic. That night, I read about a child who fell in a different park, broke her neck on the playground. Not the same girl, not the same place, but close. It was like I was never quite able to stop it. Delay it, maybe. Nudge it slightly, but not change the end. After that, I stopped trying. I just recorded. I became a passive observer of tragedies I couldn't prevent. The weight of it pressed on me every night. I drank too much, stopped showing up to work some days. People noticed, but I didn't care. Then came the dream I can't forget. I was lying in my own bed, but I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis, maybe? A shadow moved in the corner of the room. It grew taller, more defined. I could see the shape of a man, no face, just darkness where features should have been. He leaned over me. You see, because we allow it, he whispered, but not forever. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. He touched my forehead with one long, cold finger. My skin burned where he made contact. I woke up sobbing. A red mark lingered on my head for 2 days. It was cold to the touch. After that, the dreams stopped being about strangers. I started seeing myself, walking to work, crossing the street, eating at my favorite Thai place. And every time something bad happened, a car crash, a gas explosion, a collapsing balcony, always ending with me lying motionless, blood pooling under my body. The dates varied, the circumstances changed, but the result was the same. I began wondering if this was all leading to something, if the visions had a deadline. A specific day I was being shown again and again from different angles. Was I meant to stop it? Was it inevitable? 2 nights ago I had the dream again, the worst one. I was back on the same street from the first vision. Wet pavement, yellow streetlight. I turned into the alley, but this time the body on the ground was me. I was still alive, barely. I watched myself struggle to breathe. My eyes fluttered open just once, and I saw the man standing over me. Black hoodie, red cap. He looked down, and in that moment I recognized him. It was me. The man in the hoodie was me. I woke up gasping, falling off the side of the bed. My hands were trembling. I crawled to the notebook, flipping through the pages, scanning everything, looking for clues, something I missed. All the deaths, all the tragedies. They weren't just random. They were building towards something. I think I'm not just dreaming the future. I'm dreaming choices, possibilities. Some versions of me survive, some don't, but they're all real somewhere. I saw myself watching a man die in an alley. I saw myself saving a child. I saw myself being the killer, the victim, the observer, and the common thread in all of it was me. Now, when I close my eyes, I don't see strangers anymore. I see myself, and I don't know which version of me is going to wake up next, or if any of them will. Story the end.
Story number 5.
I remember the night it all began with perfect clarity. I was 27, freshly moved into a small town in upstate New York after taking a new job at a local publishing house, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, but you're still a stranger long after moving in. The house I rented was old, a 2-story Victorian that creaked in the wind and smelled faintly of wood polish and something else I couldn't place. It was cheap, which suited me fine, and I was eager to start fresh, to leave the city noise behind and find some peace. But peace didn't come. Instead, I found something I never believed in until then, a nightmare that stretched beyond the veil of sleep and into my waking life. The first dream happened about a week after I moved in. I was lying in bed, the clock ticking loudly on the nightstand, when suddenly I heard a faint knocking at my bedroom window. It wasn't the kind of knocking you hear from a branch or a stray animal. It was deliberate, slow, and measured, like someone signaling from the outside. I got up to check, thinking maybe a neighbor or some prankster was trying to spook me, but when I pulled back the curtain, nothing was there, just the thick darkness of the backyard and the gnarled shadows of old oak trees. I shrugged it off, locked the window, and went back to bed, but the knocking had followed me into sleep. In the dream, the knocking came again, louder this time, and then the window shattered. Glass rained down around me, cutting my arms and face, but I couldn't move, frozen in place by some invisible force. Through the broken glass, I saw a figure standing just outside. It was tall and thin, its face obscured by shadows. But what unsettled me most was its eyes. They glowed faintly red, like coals burning softly in the dark. I woke up with a start, my heart hammering in my chest, the scent of shattered glass lingering in the air, even though my window was intact. That morning, I found tiny shards of glass scattered on the windowsill. No sign of breakage in the window itself, no cracks, just the fragments sitting there as if they had been left behind by some unseen force. I cleaned them up carefully, wondering if I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Over the next few nights, the dreams came again. Each time, the figure got closer. I could hear it whispering, but the words were always just beyond comprehension, soft, guttural syllables that felt like an ancient language I had never heard before. The knocking at the window became a constant rhythm, like a slow heartbeat, echoing in the silence of the night. Then one night, I dreamt I was awake, but I wasn't. In this dream within a dream, I heard a voice calling my name. It wasn't human. It was distorted and echoing, like it came from far away or through a deep tunnel. I followed the sound through the dark halls of my house until I came to the basement door. It was cracked open, revealing pitch blackness beyond. In the dream, I hesitated, but something compelled me forward. I stepped down the creaking stairs, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, the figure was waiting. It reached out a skeletal hand, beckoning me closer. Then I woke up again, this time with a burning sensation on my left hand. I looked down and saw 3 thin, parallel scratches running across my skin. I didn't remember scratching myself. The marks looked fresh, and they stung sharply. I didn't tell anyone. I told myself it was stress, or maybe I'd brushed against something sharp in my sleep. But the dreams kept coming, and the scratches multiplied. Each night the figure appeared, always drawing nearer, always whispering. I tried recording myself while I slept, hoping to catch some explanation, but the tapes revealed only static and the faintest whispers that made my skin crawl. One morning I came downstairs to find the kitchen window open. I was certain I had locked it the night before. Outside, the garden was untouched, no footprints, no signs of forced entry. But on the windowsill was a small bundle tied with twine, a handful of withered leaves, and a piece of old yellowed paper. I unfolded the paper carefully. It was covered in strange symbols, like runes or some archaic script. I couldn't read it, but it radiated a strange energy, and as I held it, I felt an icy chill run down my spine. That night, the dream changed. Instead of the window, the figure appeared at my bedside. It no longer hid in the shadows. Its face was fully visible, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes that burned red. It smiled, revealing sharp teeth. "I've been waiting," it whispered in a voice like gravel scraping over stone. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. It reached toward me, and I felt a coldness spreading over my skin, freezing me from the inside out. I woke up gasping, the room freezing cold despite the heater running all night. And when I looked at my arm, I found deep scratches again, this time 5, jagged and raw. I called a friend from the city and begged her to come visit, hoping having someone around would keep the nightmares at bay. She arrived 2 days later, and for a while, things seemed better. The knocking stopped, the whispers faded. But on her third night, she woke me up screaming. She said she had seen the figure too, standing at the foot of the bed, staring at her with glowing red eyes. We searched the house together, but found nothing. She stayed for a week, and the dreams didn't come back. When she left, I felt safe for a moment. I even thought maybe it was all in my head. Then the real terror began. One afternoon, I was cleaning the attic when I found a small wooden box tucked behind an old trunk. Inside were faded photographs of a woman who looked eerily like me, standing in the same house. The pictures were dated back to the 1920s. A few pages of a diary lay beneath the photos, filled with cramped handwriting. I took it downstairs and began to read. The diary belonged to a woman named Clara, who had lived in the house nearly a century ago. Her entries described strange occurrences, footsteps in empty rooms, whispers in the dark, and a presence she could never escape. She wrote of dreams where a shadowy figure came to her, scratching at her skin, whispering in an ancient tongue. One entry stood out. It spoke of a curse placed on the house by a scorned lover, a man who had dabbled in dark rituals to bind Clara's soul to the house forever. The final words were chilling. "If you read this, beware. The shadow waits for you too." I slammed the diary shut, heart pounding. Could this be why the dreams were following me? Why the figure kept appearing? That night, I dreamt of Clara. She was standing in the hallway, pale and trembling, reaching out to me. "It's not just dreams," she whispered. "It's real. It lives here. It feeds on fear." I woke up sweating, feeling a new resolve. I couldn't keep living like this. I researched the house's history and discovered that several people had lived there over the decades, many leaving abruptly or suffering mysterious illnesses. The last tenant before me had vanished without a trace. Determined to break the cycle, I sought out a local historian and told him about Clara and the diary. He hesitated, then handed me a faded newspaper clipping. It told of a man named Elias, Clara's lover, who disappeared under suspicious circumstances after being accused of witchcraft. Locals said his spirit haunted the house, unable to rest until his curse was broken. That night, I tried something desperate. I burned the paper with the strange symbols from the windowsill, chanting some of the words I'd memorized from the diary. The air grew heavy, the house groaned, and for the first time, I felt the presence retreat. But the figure didn't disappear. It came to me one last time, closer than ever. It spoke clearly. "You cannot run from me." I screamed, and suddenly I was awake, wide awake in my own bed. But something had changed. From that night on, the scratches stopped. The knocking faded into silence. The figure never appeared again, except in my dreams. But now I know that some nightmares don't just stay in your head. Sometimes they wait for you to wake up, to find you in the shadows between worlds. And when that happens, the only thing left is to hold your breath and hope the nightmare doesn't cross over. Story the end.
Story number 6.
The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. I had just moved into my new apartment in a part of the city I barely knew, and the stress of the job hunt, the new environment, and loneliness had been wearing me down. Sleep was the only refuge I had, but even that was starting to feel unsafe. I remember lying down on the creaky mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling as the humid summer air clung to my skin. The old fan in the corner barely moved the stale air. That night, I dreamed of the apartment, only it was darker, colder, and the air felt thick, almost suffocating. I was wandering the hallways, but they were wrong somehow. The door to my bedroom was missing. Instead, there was a long, narrow corridor leading to a room I didn't recognize. I pushed open the door at the end of the corridor and saw a man sitting on a chair facing away from me. His shoulders were tense, like he was waiting for something terrible to happen. I called out, but he didn't respond. When I reached out to touch his shoulder, he turned slowly. The face was mine, pale, drawn eyes sunken like a corpse's. But the eyes were the worst part. They were completely black, like endless voids. I woke up gasping, my heart pounding so hard I was sure it would break through my ribs. It took me a while to convince myself it was just a nightmare. I tried to shake the image from my mind and went about my day. But as I unlocked my apartment that morning, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The door to the bedroom had a long scratch on the edge, like someone had tried to claw their way in. It was fresh. I told myself it was just the building settling, or maybe a stray cat scratching outside. It didn't make sense to think otherwise. The next night, the dream returned. But it was different. This time, I was inside the strange room at the end of the corridor. The man with black eyes was sitting on the floor, head buried in his hands, rocking back and forth. The walls around us were covered with faded photographs, pictures of people I didn't recognize. Some laughing, some crying, some with their eyes obscured. I tried to leave, but the door slammed shut, locking me inside. I pounded on it, screaming for help, but the man didn't move. Suddenly, he looked up, his black eyes boring into mine, and whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." I jolted awake again, drenched in sweat. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the street lamp outside my window. My breathing was ragged. I glanced at the bedroom door, half expecting it to be missing again, but it was there, intact. Relieved, I tried to fall back asleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Over the next few days, the scratches appeared on the bedroom door, growing longer, deeper. I cleaned the marks, but they returned every night. Objects in my apartment began moving subtly. Books shifted, keys disappeared and reappeared. My phone was sometimes found on the floor instead of the table. One morning, I found muddy footprints across the living room carpet. The front door was locked, windows shut tight. I didn't own shoes that matched the prints. I started recording my dreams in a journal, desperate to find some pattern or explanation. Each night, I dreamed more vividly of the dark corridor, the room, and the man with black eyes. One dream, I found a note pinned to the wall in the strange room. It read, "He's coming." When I woke up, my apartment's hallway walls had fresh scuff marks running along them. I had no explanation for the handwriting on the sticky note stuck to my fridge. "You can't hide." I called a friend from college, someone who had always been into the supernatural, hoping for advice. She suggested it might be a form of sleep paralysis mixed with a vivid hypnagogic state. "But it's your mind playing tricks," she said. I wanted to believe her. But then the dreams started bleeding into waking life in ways I couldn't ignore. One evening, I was brushing my teeth when the bathroom mirror fogged up, even though the window was open and the fan was running. In the condensation, the words, "Open the door," appeared. I wiped the glass clean and looked behind me. Nothing. Then I heard a faint scratching at the bedroom door. I stood frozen, heart racing. The scratching stopped. I turned to look, and the door handle slowly turned. I ran out of the apartment and didn't stop until I was 2 blocks away. For the next week, I stayed with a friend. I avoided sleep as much as I could, but exhaustion caught up. When I finally fell asleep, the dream was worse. The corridor was longer, darker. The man was there, closer this time, reaching out with his black eyes. I could feel his breath on my face, cold and damp. Suddenly I woke up, gasping. I sat up in bed and saw him, my doppelganger, standing at the foot of the bed, eyes black, grin wide and cruel. I screamed, but no sound came out. He lunged at me. I blacked out. When I woke, I was lying on the floor, the bedroom door wide open. I packed my things and moved out that day. Weeks later, I learned the building I'd lived in had a dark history. A man who resembled me, same age, same build, had disappeared from that apartment years ago under mysterious circumstances. Police never found him. Neighbors reported strange noises and shadows moving at night. I thought it was coincidence, but the nightmares haven't stopped. Every night, I see him, the man with the black eyes, the false me, waiting in the darkness, telling me I'm late, telling me I'm not supposed to be here. And sometimes when I look in the mirror, I catch a glimpse of those black eyes staring back. Story the end.
Story number 7.
It started with the dreams. At first, they seemed random and disconnected from reality, the kind of odd, unsettling nightmares most people experience from time to time. But as the nights wore on, the dreams grew more vivid, more specific, and then, frighteningly, more real. What I saw and felt in those dreams started to seep into my waking world. I'm Michael. I was 26 when this all began, working as a software developer in a quiet suburb not far from Chicago. I lived alone in a small, somewhat dated apartment complex. Nothing fancy, but comfortable enough. I didn't have many close friends, and my days were mostly spent coding or binging shows late into the night. One evening, I went to bed early, hoping to catch up on sleep after a week of overtime. I had a strange dream that night, but I didn't think much of it when I woke up. In the dream, I was standing in my apartment hallway, but something was wrong. The walls seemed stretched, like someone had pulled at the corners, and the light bulbs flickered weakly. The hallway smelled like damp concrete and old wood. Then I noticed the door to my neighbor's unit, a door I never really paid attention to before, was cracked open just an inch. I could hear faint sounds from inside, a rhythmic tapping like fingers drumming on a table, slow and deliberate. I woke up feeling uneasy, but dismissed it as a typical nightmare. That morning, I left my apartment early, rushing to work. When I returned in the evening, I saw the door to my neighbor's apartment was exactly as it had been in the dream, cracked open an inch. I froze for a moment, heart pounding. I never saw that door open before. The complex was usually quiet, and most neighbors kept their doors shut tight. It could have been a coincidence. Maybe they left it open to air out the place. I leaned closer, trying to hear if the tapping was real. I heard nothing. The silence felt heavier, almost suffocating. I shut the door gently and locked it, convincing myself it was nothing. That night, the dream returned, but more vivid, more intense. I was back in the hallway again, but this time the walls looked damp, the paint peeling in long strips. The flickering light was brighter, and the tapping sound was louder, echoing down the hall. But now I noticed a pair of eyes staring at me from the gap in the door. Not human eyes, too large, too black and glossy. The eyes blinked once, slowly, and then the door creaked wider open. The tapping turned into scratching, like claws scraping against wood. I jolted awake, sweat pouring down my face. My phone said 3:13 a.m. I sat up, heart racing, ears straining for any noise. The hallway was silent. I flicked on the bedside lamp and lay back down, staring at the ceiling until dawn. The next day, I decided to ask the building manager about the door. Maybe someone had moved in, or maintenance had been done. She said the unit had been vacant for months, since the previous tenant moved out suddenly. No notice, no forwarding address. Maintenance hadn't had reason to go inside. The door was supposed to be locked and closed. I felt a chill. How had it been open then? That night, the dream came again. I was standing just outside the neighbor's door, the gap now wider. The black eyes were there, unblinking. The scratching was furious now, frantic, as if whatever was inside wanted out. I reached out my hand to push the door closed, but it swung open on its own. I felt a cold rush, like icy wind, wash over me. Then the eyes blinked again. Only this time, I heard a whisper. My name, drawn out slow and low. I woke up screaming, trembling. For the next few days, I started to avoid that hallway. I tried not to think about the dreams, but they haunted me every night, the door always open, the eyes always watching. One morning, I found a note slipped under my apartment door. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, as if written by someone in distress. Do not open the door. I froze. Who would leave this note? My neighbors? But the units next to me were empty. I showed the note to the manager, but she said no one reported anything. No one else had lived there for months. That night, I dreamt something new. The dream wasn't in the hallway this time. I was inside the neighbor's apartment. The air was stale, thick with dust. The walls were cracked and damp, covered in strange black stains that seemed to pulse. The scratching was deafening. I could feel something moving just beyond my vision, something waiting, watching. I tried to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me. I was trapped. Panic set in, and I pounded on the walls, screaming for help, but no sound escaped. Then the eyes appeared again, floating in the dark, closer now, and the whispering voice spoke, "You shouldn't be here." I woke up, gasping for air. My sheets were soaked in sweat. I started losing sleep. I was afraid to close my eyes, afraid of what I'd see next. One evening, I stayed late at work, hoping exhaustion would drown out the nightmares. When I finally got home, I found the note slipped under my door again. "They are coming." That same night, the dreams stopped. I thought maybe they were over. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks and my body finally rested. But then the waking nightmares began. I started hearing tapping and scratching at the neighbor's door when I was awake. Soft at first, like someone lightly knocking, but it grew louder, frantic, like claws tearing at wood. I never dared to open the door. I would just listen, frozen in place, waiting for something to happen. One night, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Slow, deliberate. My heart thumped in my chest. I reached for my phone to use as a flashlight, but it slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath. A cold breeze brushed my neck. I felt a breath, cold and wet, on the back of my head. And then a whisper. "Michael." I didn't sleep for 3 days after that. On the fourth night, I had a dream that terrified me more than any before. I was standing in the hallway again, the neighbor's door fully open now. Inside was darkness so thick it felt solid. But in the middle of the room, I saw something sitting on a broken chair. A figure draped in shadows. It turned slowly toward me, and though it had no face, I felt its eyes piercing through me. It whispered my name again. The figure reached out, and I felt cold fingers brush my skin. I woke up screaming, and this time I found scratches on my arm. 3 long, thin marks, fresh and bleeding. I knew then the dreams were bleeding into reality. I started researching the history of the building, desperate for answers. I found an old news article about a man who lived in that unit years ago. He had gone missing under mysterious circumstances. The police never found him, and the apartment remained locked up for months after. There were rumors that the man had been obsessed with communicating with the dead, performing rituals to open doors between worlds. I felt sick. I realized I was dealing with something that wasn't just a haunting. It was a crossing point, a place where whatever was behind that door could reach through. One night, unable to stand it anymore, I decided to confront it. I took a crowbar from the maintenance closet and went to the neighbor's door. My hands trembled as I pulled it open. The apartment was empty and dark, thick with dust and decay. But the air was electric, buzzing like static. The door slammed shut behind me, and I was plunged into darkness. Suddenly, the whispering voices surrounded me, calling my name, echoing from the walls. The temperature dropped, and I felt invisible hands gripping my arms. Panic overtook me, and I slammed my fist against the door, screaming. The door burst open, and I fell out into the hallway, gasping. I looked back. The apartment was empty, but the door closed slowly on its own. After that night, the dreams stopped. The voices faded. The scratching ceased. I moved out of that apartment the next week. I still have nightmares sometimes, but none like before. Sometimes I wonder if what I saw was real or just my mind unraveling. But I know one thing for sure. Dreams can bleed into reality, and some doors are better left closed. Story the end.
Story number 8.
I used to be a skeptic about things like nightmares or dreams having any power outside the sleep state. Like most people, I figured dreams were just random firing of neurons, the brain's way of sorting through the mess of daily life. But after what happened to me, I don't know what to believe anymore. It started on a cold Friday night in early November. I was 28, working as a graphic designer in a small but decent firm in the city. I had recently moved into a cheap one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, mostly because I wanted to live alone and the rent was affordable. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The building was old, the pipes creaked, and the neighbors were mostly quiet. all pretty normal for a place built in the 70s. That first night, I had an odd dream. I was standing outside my apartment building. The night was unusually still, the streetlight flickering overhead. In the dream, I was staring up at my apartment window, the one in my bedroom, and I saw a shadow moving behind the blinds. It wasn't a normal shadow, it was distorted, like a dark stain spreading over the glass. I couldn't make out any shape, but the feeling of dread was intense. I tried to look away, but I was frozen, trapped by something unseen. Then suddenly I felt a tap on my shoulder. I spun around in the dream to see my own face staring back at me, but it was wrong. His eyes were black, like voids, no whites, no iris, just darkness. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. The smile was wide, unnatural. Then he whispered, "It's only the beginning." I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. It was around 3 a.m. The room was dark except for the orange glow of the streetlight filtering through the blinds. For a moment, I sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing. Then I noticed the bedroom window was open. It wasn't supposed to be. I always kept it locked, especially at night. I closed it, locked it carefully, and went back to bed. I told myself it was just a bad dream, the kind you get when your mind is overloaded or when you're anxious about moving to a new place. But things didn't stop there. The next day at work, I kept seeing flashes of the dream in my mind. The black-eyed face, the spreading shadow. When I got home, I locked the door, checked the windows, and tried to relax. I spent most of the evening binge-watching old shows to distract myself. That night, the dream came again, almost identical, except this time the shadow behind the window was clearer. It looked like a figure, hunched and twisted. The black-eyed version of me appeared again, this time stepping out of the shadows and walking toward me. He reached out his hand, and when I tried to pull away, I realized I couldn't move. He said the same thing, "It's only the beginning." I woke up again around 4 a.m. My phone screen was cracked. I don't remember it falling or anything hitting it. I thought maybe I'd thrown it off the bed in my sleep. The window was open again. This time I panicked a little and closed it, double-checked the lock. Over the next few days, the dreams escalated. Each night, the figure with black eyes got closer, spoke louder. The shadow behind the blinds stretched over the glass, almost spilling into the room. I started noticing weird things during the day, things I couldn't explain. For example, my keys would disappear from the table and show up somewhere else in the apartment. My shoes would be facing a different direction. Once I found muddy footprints on the carpet near the window, even though it hadn't rained and the door was locked. I started to question my sanity. I tried to tell myself it was just anxiety or stress, but I found myself sleeping less and less, afraid of falling into those dreams. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see that dark face staring back at me. One afternoon, I decided to record my dreams in a journal. I wanted to understand if there was any pattern or maybe get a grip on what was happening. The next dream was different. I was no longer outside the building. I was inside my apartment, or at least a version of it. The walls were the same, the furniture in the same place, but everything looked decayed, like it had been abandoned for years. The air was heavy, and a low hum filled the room. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned slowly and saw the black-eyed figure standing by the kitchen door. He smiled and said, "You shouldn't have moved." I ran toward the front door, but it was gone. Instead, there was a brick wall. I pounded on it, screamed for help, but nothing changed. Then the figure stepped closer and whispered, "Now, you belong here." I woke up with tears in my eyes. I didn't sleep much after that. The nightmares seeped into my waking life. Shadows seemed to flicker at the edge of my vision. The air in the apartment would get cold suddenly. Sometimes I'd hear whispering, but when I turned, no one was there. One night, after a particularly bad dream, I stayed awake until dawn. At 5 a.m., I was sitting in my living room when I heard the faint sound of scratching at the bedroom door. My heart hammered. I told myself it was the building settling. But then the scratching turned to knocking, soft, deliberate knocks. I gathered my courage, walked to the door, and opened it. No one, just the empty hallway, silent and still. I closed the door quickly and locked it. From that night on, the knocking continued. Sometimes it was just scratching, sometimes it was pounding like someone was desperate to get in. I started sleeping in the living room with the lights on, but it didn't help. The figure from my dream started appearing in the room when my eyes were closed. I could see his black eyes staring through the darkness. One morning, I woke up to find my bedroom door wide open, the window shattered. I called the police, but they found no signs of forced entry or anyone having been inside. The building superintendent told me nothing unusual had been reported. I considered moving, but I was afraid to leave. It felt like the nightmare would follow me. One day, I met an older man in the building lobby who told me stories about the history of the apartment complex. Apparently, decades ago, a man had disappeared from an apartment on my floor. The police never found him, but neighbors claimed to hear strange noises and see flickering shadows. I told him about my dreams, the black-eyed figure. He looked at me with a knowing expression and said, "Some things don't stay buried. You have to find a way to close the door." I had no idea what he meant. Desperate, I started researching dreams, sleep paralysis, and hauntings. I tried everything: meditation, sleeping with a light on, rituals I found online. Nothing worked. One night, the figure spoke clearer than ever. "You can't escape," he said. "We are connected." I asked, "Who are you?" He smiled, black eyes glowing. "I'm you, the part you ignored, the shadow inside." I realized then that the figure was some dark reflection of myself, born from fears, regrets, and guilt I had buried deep inside. The more I denied him, the stronger he became. One day, I confronted him in a dream. I told him I wasn't afraid anymore. I said, "I accept you. I'm ready to face you." The dream shifted. The apartment looked brighter. The shadows receded. The figure smiled, this time with normal eyes. He said, "Welcome back." I woke up feeling lighter, like a heavy weight had been lifted. Since then, the dreams have stopped. The scratches on the door disappeared. The noises ceased. I still get chills sometimes when I look at the window, wondering if the shadow is watching. But I learned that dreams aren't just stories your mind tells. Sometimes they're doorways to parts of yourself you need to face, no matter how terrifying. Story the end.
Story number 9.
It started with a dream. At least that's what I thought. The night before it all changed, I was asleep, drifting off as usual, when I had this strange dream. Vivid, unnerving, but oddly familiar. I was walking through my childhood home, but it was different. Darker, colder. The windows were all shut tight, no light filtering in. The wallpaper peeled in places I didn't remember, and the old grandfather clock in the hall was frozen at 3:15. In the dream, I walked down the hall to my old bedroom, the one at the far end. The door was slightly ajar, and inside there was something on the floor. I stepped in, heart pounding, and saw a small, worn-out, leather-bound book lying there, open to a page with strange symbols I didn't recognize. Then I heard a soft voice behind me, whispering my name. I turned, but there was no one there. Just the cold, empty room. I woke up suddenly, drenched in sweat. I looked at my clock. It was 3:15 a.m. The next day, I brushed it off as a weird, stressful dream. I hadn't been sleeping well lately, and the dream was probably my mind trying to process some buried anxiety. But that night, the dream returned, almost exactly the same. Walking down the darkened hall of my childhood home, the door ajar, the book on the floor, the whispering voice. I woke again at exactly 3:15 a.m., heart racing. By the third night, I was starting to feel uneasy. I was afraid to go to bed. The dream was always the same, but something about it felt different, more real, more urgent, like it was trying to tell me something I wasn't understanding. I began to notice small things during the day that unsettled me. Misplaced items, cold spots in my apartment, the sound of footsteps when no one was there. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from my mother. She asked if I remembered the old leather-bound book from my childhood, being the one I used to keep hidden under my bed. I was confused. I had completely forgotten about it. She told me that when she cleaned out the attic recently, she found the book, tucked inside an old chest. She asked if I wanted it back. When I went to pick it up that evening, my hands trembled as I flipped through its yellowed pages. The book was full of strange symbols, diagrams, and handwritten notes in a language I couldn't understand. The same symbols from my dream stared back at me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, trying to shake the feeling that something was watching me. Then, at exactly 3:15 a.m., I heard a whisper, soft, deliberate, calling my name. I sat up, heart pounding, and realized the voice was coming from the book lying open on my bedside table. Over the next few days, the dreams became more detailed. The hallway was no longer just dark. It was suffocatingly cold, and the walls seemed to close in. In the dream, I was always searching for something, but the book never helped. The whispering voice grew louder, more insistent, sometimes chanting in that strange language. One night, I dreamt that I was standing in front of the old oak tree behind my childhood home. It was twisted and gnarled, unlike how I remembered it. At the base of the tree, there was a small, freshly dug hole. I reached down and pulled out a small metal box. Inside was a key, old, rusted, but heavy in my hand. I woke up with a start and immediately looked out my window. The oak tree was there, just like in my dream. But I hadn't been home in years. I was living across town now, miles from my childhood house. I brushed it off. It was just a dream, right? A few days later, I got an unexpected message from my mother. "You should come home. We found something beneath the oak tree." Curiosity and a growing sense of dread pulled me back. I went home that weekend, heart heavy. When I arrived, my mother and her husband were waiting in the yard by the tree. Between them, half buried in the dirt, was the same small metal box from my dream. They hadn't opened it yet. I knelt down and carefully took the box in my hands. The rust crumbled under my fingers as I flipped it open. Inside was a small, ancient-looking key, exactly like the one in my dream. I felt a chill run down my spine. That night, I dreamed again. This time, I used the key to open a hidden door inside the house, a door I'd never seen before. Beyond it was a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. The whispering voice beckoned me forward. I woke up before I could descend the stairs, heart pounding. The next morning, I searched the house, checking every room, every closet. In the basement, behind a loose panel of drywall, I found the door from my dream. My hands shook as I inserted the key. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open, revealing a steep, narrow staircase, descending into cold blackness. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly climbed down. The air was damp and musty, the walls rough stone. At the bottom, I found a small chamber filled with dusty relics, old photographs, letters, and a rusted, ornate box resting on a pedestal. I opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a diary. Brittle pages filled with handwriting I recognized instantly. It was my great-grandfather's journal. As I read, I learned things I never knew about my family. Dark secrets about rituals, hidden societies, and an ancient curse passed down through generations. The symbols in the leather-bound book matched the ones scrawled in the margins. The whispering voice was a warning, a plea. Over the next weeks, the dreams grew more urgent, more violent. I saw shadows creeping through the house, reaching for me in the dark. I heard footsteps pacing above the hidden chamber, even when I was alone. The air grew heavier, colder. One night, I dreamed I was trapped beneath the house, the walls closing in. The voice whispered one last thing: break the cycle. I woke, trembling, and made a decision. I burned the leather-bound book, the diary, and all the relics from the chamber. The flames swallowed the past, the secrets, the curse. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. The dreams ceased. The whispers faded. But sometimes when the clock strikes 3:15 a.m., I swear I hear a soft voice calling my name, a reminder that some dreams are never just dreams. Story, the end.
Story number 10.
I remember the exact moment when my dreams stopped being just dreams. At first, it was subtle, little things that I shrugged off. A feeling, a sound, a glimpse of something familiar in the shadows. But soon, the boundary between sleep and reality blurred, until I couldn't tell which was which anymore. It all started when I moved into a new apartment in a quiet part of town. It was a small one-bedroom on the third floor of an old brick building, the kind of place that had character, but also creaks in the night. I was excited but exhausted after the move, so the first night I slept hard. That night, I dreamt of a hallway. It wasn't in the apartment or any place I'd ever seen before, but it was long and narrow, painted an icy pale blue, with flickering overhead lights that cast shadows in strange shapes. At the far end stood a figure, a woman, I think. I couldn't see her face clearly. She was wearing a long dress, old-fashioned, like from the 1920s or 30s, and she held something small in her hand, but I couldn't tell what. I walked toward her, but every step echoed loudly. When I got closer, she turned her head slowly, and I saw her face was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were completely black. I felt cold, bone-chilling cold, But before I could say anything, she whispered a name. My name. I jolted awake, heart pounding, the clock blinking 3:33 a.m. I shook it off. Dreams can be weird, I told myself, just a bad dream. But then the next night, the same hallway appeared, the same flickering lights, the same figure. Only this time I noticed the object in her hand was a small mirror, cracked and grimy. She raised it to her face, and as she looked into it, her eyes changed. They became my eyes. Then she smiled, a sad, crooked smile, and whispered my name again. I woke up sweating, and when I looked at my bedside table, I found a small piece of broken glass. It wasn't there before I went to bed. I brushed it off as something from the move or the building, but unease started settling in. Over the next week, the dreams became more vivid and frequent. Each night, the woman led me through the endless hallway. Sometimes she'd whisper warnings I couldn't understand. Sometimes she'd show me glimpses of places I'd never seen. Old rooms with peeling wallpaper, furniture covered in dust, a fireplace with dying embers. And then things from the dream started appearing in reality. One morning, I woke to find a faint smudge on my bedroom wall, like a handprint pressed into the paint. I tried to clean it, but it wouldn't come off. It was faint, but if I looked closely, I could swear it looked like a woman's hand, long, slender fingers. At work, I told a close friend about the dreams, expecting her to laugh or tell me it was stress, but instead she went quiet. Then she said, "That building was built over an old hospital. It's been abandoned for decades. There are stories about a nurse who died here under tragic circumstances." Her words stuck with me, but I wanted to know more. So after work, I went to the local library and dug through the archives. It was true. The apartment building had been erected on the site of a former hospital that had burned down in the 1940s. Among the victims was a nurse named Margaret Collins. She had been found dead in one of the hallways, reportedly clutching a shattered mirror. I felt my blood run cold. It was the same mirror from my dreams. That night, my dreams took a terrifying turn. I wasn't in the hallway anymore. I was standing in a hospital ward. Long rows of empty beds, broken windows, peeling paint. The smell of antiseptic and something metallic filled the air. The woman appeared again, Margaret, and this time she wasn't alone. Other shadowy figures hovered near the beds, silent and watching. Margaret approached me and whispered, "Help me." I reached out, but my hand passed through her like smoke. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. Then the ward began to darken, the shadows closing in around me until I felt myself falling into a void. I woke up choking, my sheets twisted around me. My chest ached, like I'd been holding my breath for too long. From then on, I couldn't ignore the connection between my dreams and reality. Strange things happened during the day. Doors I'd locked the night before were found wide open. Lights flickered even when the bulbs were new. Sometimes I'd see movement out of the corner of my eye, a flash of white fabric, or the glimpse of a figure just beyond the doorway. One night, I finally reached out for help. I found a local medium online, a woman who specialized in restless spirits. We arranged a session at my apartment. When she arrived, she brought candles, crystals, and some old books. The air grew thick with incense as she closed her eyes and spoke in a low, rhythmic voice. She told me that Margaret's spirit was trapped, confused, and reaching out through my dreams because I was connected to the house's history, somehow. How? I asked. She said that some people were more sensitive to these energies, that my subconscious was acting as a bridge between the living and the dead. The medium said the only way to help Margaret move on was to find the shattered mirror, the physical link keeping her tethered to this world. I realized I still had that tiny shard of glass from my bedside table. The medium instructed me to hold it tightly and focus on the image of Margaret, telling her that I wanted to help, that she could finally let go. I did as she said. The room grew cold. The candles flickered violently, casting giant shadows on the walls. I could feel a pressure in the air, like something unseen pressing against my chest. Then a whisper, barely audible, floated through the room. "Thank you." After that night, the dream stopped. The hallway vanished. The woman with black eyes never appeared again. But the feeling of being watched never quite left me. Sometimes when I look into a mirror, I catch a glimpse of something, a shadow standing behind me, or a pale face reflected just out of focus. I blink and it's gone. I moved out a few months later, The apartment felt empty without that presence, but also strangely lighter. Before I left, I found an old, dusty mirror in the basement. It was cracked, the edges worn and chipped. I didn't take it with me. Instead, I left it carefully covered in a cloth, hoping whatever tied Margaret to this world would stay behind. Sometimes I wonder if I really helped her move on, or if, like a whisper carried on the wind, she's still watching, waiting in the places where dreams and reality meet, where shadows linger just beyond the edge of sight. Because some dreams aren't just dreams, they're warnings. And sometimes what haunts you in sleep follows you home. Story the end.